it's up to you.
Anybody else interested in doing it? I used to do them with another club member who doesn't attend much. And we got down to where we could do it in about an hour. But, what? Yeah. I remember. Okay, well, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right. Okay, well, thanks for being here. We're excited to have another monthly meeting, and can you believe it's April already? Certainly is spring in the Ozarks, and it's a great time to be here. Has anybody caught a swarm? Anybody catch, wow, look at all the hands. Anybody catch a swarm that was your own bees?
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those exciting and, you know, I guess mixed feeling kind of things, right? Okay, well, let's get started. We just want to thank Brian for fixing our PowerPoint announcements again. Sometimes I forget to say thanks to all of our helpers, but we appreciate you doing that. And I think a lot of the mentees, Earl, how's it going back there?
I've talked to quite a few that haven't, but they haven't been back here yet to pick up their folder yet.
Okay, so if you're a mentee and your name was up here, or if you got an email saying we would have a folder for you, we do have one back in the back, and just need to pick it up, and then we have a form for you to sign off that you got it. Okay, let's see here. Okay, snacks, help yourselves. I think it was up there. There's several. We've got a lot of snacks. We even have snacks left over from our bee classes that were donated to us, so we would be glad for you to take something. We carry them home, bring it back, carry them home, bring it back. We'd love for somebody else to do that. Let's see here. Also, there are some handouts on the table. These are things that have been given to the bee club to pass out. So please, tonight, before you leave, take a look at some of the materials there. And then our presenter has brought some really great articles and different materials on that corner table back there. And so you'll want to take a look at that tonight and see what you want to take home with you. There's some really great stuff. Okay, let me see here. Okay, I need to tell you quickly that on Saturday, June the 10th, seems like a long way away, but you know it's going to be here like day after tomorrow, right? The club will host a field day at the home of Lambertus Blocker. We did that last year. If you were part of it, you know it was a really fun and interesting day. You get to bring your bee suit and go look at hives with someone else, and also tour around their property to look at different kinds of plants that you can plant to feed the bees. And it's just a fun day. And so mark your calendar, Saturday, June the 10th. Do we have a time yet? I mean, I figured I would just throw out the date this time.
Probably from 9 to 11.
Okay, it'll be in the morning, 9 to 11 or something like that. But we'll get more information. We just wanted to throw a date out because, you know, calendars fill up pretty fast. Tonight we do have kind of a bonus feature. I actually haven't taken time to read all the announcements up there, so maybe this was already covered, but we have two experienced and two very experienced beekeepers that will stay after the program to answer questions that you have on any topic, not about our presentation, but like if you've just encountered kind of a puzzling situation with your bees and you would like to ask somebody. That's one of the things we're trying to incorporate a little bit more, is just giving people the opportunity to get the answers that they need for beekeeping their particular situation. So tonight, Maureen and Jeff, right? I haven't seen Jeff. Where is he?
He'll show up.
He'll show up, she says. Okay. So Jeff and Maureen will be set up just after the meeting closes tonight for a little while. So be thinking about what question you have, and we'll try to get get that set up and get them answering your questions just as quick as the program ends tonight.
Amen. We'll be out in the lobby in the corner there.
Okay. Yes. So they'll be at a table out there. So as you file out, grab your materials, and then file out and ask your questions to two experts. Putting the pressure on. Okay, let's see here. Dr. Jim Pickett, I already talked to you about the swamp. So now I'm going to invite Winfred Spocker up to, he's going to do a couple of things. He's going to talk to, if you were here last week, you know that we discussed just a simple bylaws change that has to be voted on by the membership. So he's going to cover that, and then another bit of information that he's going to share with you tonight. So here's Winfred.
Thank you, Annette. So we need to vote very quickly on the bylaws. At this moment, we have in our bylaws that we start our monthly meetings from March to November. We want to change this from February to October. And then in October, we have a picnic that will be basically the last official meeting of the year when we close the year, because November and December are often for many people complicated. Okay? So I like to see from the paid members a raised hand if we adopt this change of the dates. Very good. Okay? Who is against it? Nobody. Excellent. Carrie? Where's Carrie? She can write down in the minutes. She's outside. Okay? That we have adopted the change. Okay. Then another question. Who has got the nematodes? Okay. Remember, very important, that these nematodes live in the soil and they move in the soil in a thin film of moisture, water. So if it's getting dry, they desiccate, they die before the beetles really start their reproduction with warmer weather. So try, especially if we have now a week with no rain, try to keep around the hives when you have sprinkled the nematodes, keep it moist. Okay? So very important. Okay? Nematodes don't like very dry soil, they don't like freezing wet. Okay? That's why we need to re-inject these nematodes each year. Basically that was it. If you have any question on nematodes after the meeting, we can talk about it.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to have a door prize drawing or two.
Three, actually. Okay, three, Andy Cooper. Andy Cooper. All right, what you got? Number one. Hang on a second, I'll go over what we got. Nathan Lodgton. And Jennifer Beasley.
Okay, and that was Maureen Grace helping out with that. Okay, now then we're going to move on to Mel Zabecki is going to, where is she? Oh, right in front of me. Okay, she's going to do a quick presentation called Equipment Spotlight. And she's going to explain, I'll just let her tell you what she's going to talk about. She's going to talk about some different things.
Starting my timer because I can talk for 7 hours. Okay, so we were our idea was this is going to be like total. You guys are going to tell me I'm all wrong. I know, but a lot of you, some of you that are new, you're wondering about bee suits, bee veils, lots of other equipment. So this month I want to go over one thing, and the next month I'm going to ask somebody else to go over. Wow, you brought me all kinds of presents. Next month we'll go over another type of equipment, just to sort of show you different variations of things that different beekeepers use. Now, you will figure out the way that you like to do it. But we just brought a few examples of different types of things. Today I'm going to go over veils/suits and also some gloves. So Ed Levi wears exactly what he's wearing right now in the bee yard, except this is what he wears, except he usually wears a veil. He doesn't wear gloves. I've seen you put a veil on, but he doesn't wear gloves. So, you know, there are people that just wear what they're wearing and put maybe a veil on and get in their hives. No pain, no pain, no pain. Something that's the very bare minimum. Those don't match. It doesn't really matter. The very bare minimum, I would say, is I got stung 5 times on the head this weekend. It is so miserable. So, because there were bees in my bonnet, so I have them in the veil because I was stupid and didn't get it ready. So anyway, so this is your very bare minimum. This is my first veil. I've had it for 15 years. And basically the way that it works is it's just a plastic helmet that you put over, and it's very unbecoming because what you do is there's like a tab right here. So you have to pull the long strings around your back. And I'm not going to do it because it's, like I said, it's the most unbecoming thing you can do, especially for a female, because you're going to pull these tabs through and then tie it around. But it's so that the veil itself gets pulled down, away from everything so that you can't fly up in there. So this is a really, really, really basic one. It's really old, but that's what I keep for loners and for, thank you. Oh, you're getting my lovely assistant? Here, I'm going to show you my setup. So I wear this jacket, and it's vented a little bit. It's not the best one. It says hers because my ex-husband and I used to keep together, and we used to have a his and a hers. So he still keeps, but he's in Eastern Arkansas. So this is just your basic. Isn't it dirty? When you first get all your equipment, it's so beautiful. And then it's just like the first time you get in, you're filthy, and there's just no reason to ever try to clean it, I don't think. But it's, it gets pretty hot. That's why a lot of people don't want to wear whole jackets and stuff like that. And the suit gets even hotter. So when you're in the middle of the summer, you really don't want to be messing with something that's going to make you really hot. Oh, so Dorothy has a big, nice suit, and it's really nice and vented all the way down. So it's got a plastic kind of inside, and then the what do you call it? The screen around it. So this is really nice. Do you wear it?
It's brand new.
Brand new. Okay. And the thing about the top part here is that this is I was asked about this earlier. These things here, I don't take good enough care of my equipment, and I wind up just curling stuff in a big ball and throwing it in the corner. I would wind up bending this type of thing, and it would never go back to the right shape. But that's a beautiful suit, and there's all kinds of cool little pockets to put your hive tools so you don't put it down and lose it like everybody does. And then these are gloves that are usually leather on the bottom and that are a little bit lighter on the top so you're not sweating to death. And my gloves are also leather on the bottom. Look, nice, new, disgusting, and old. But so anyway, the gloves are good to go up, above your elbows. But what I wind up doing is this does get kind of you have to get all the way up in there after you got your suit on and stuff like that. Carrie wears nitrile gloves.
You can get them in different thicknesses. I like the 9 mil to 15 mil.
9 mil to
And
15
the thicker they
mil.
are, the more times you can reuse them. But
Yeah.
the main reason I use them, they can still see you through them.
Yes.
You don't get the propolis all over your
Yeah,
hands.
the propolis and
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, those are really cool ones too. So yeah, we've got different kinds of gloves. And then there's another kind of jacket that's more solid, and a cotton, and this is Zach Rose, and square side. So, it takes a while to get used to seeing through these things, but I think it's, really important. And then you have to be organized enough to get all the zips in the right place, and that was my problem this weekend with the Velcro, and 5 of them got in there and just got me. Actually, they got me after I got the whole thing off. Then they came and attacked me. I was like all calm and taking my thing, and then they hit me.
Maureen's got a full one.
Oh, yeah, let's see Maureen.
I've got a different one. It's a little lightweight. But the trouble that I always have
4 minutes.
is, I don't know about you guys, but I get out in the wind and my helmet gets blown off, and then I'm like, I can't see anything. This has a nifty little chin strap, so you get it on, and you tuck it under your chin, and it stays in place better. So it works when it's breezy.
That's nice.
It works when it's a little windy, but when it gets gusty, I don't know. And we live in a very gusty spot.
Yeah.
So it's lightweight. I like that because when you have a heavy jacket on and gloves, then it does get pretty warm.
Where's this from?
It's a license.
Oh, wow. That's cool. But you don't need too many pockets because you wind up, everything's so dirty, you don't want to put anything, and then you forget about them, and then you find like all kinds of weird things in them later, so. Huh?
Lemongrass.
Exactly. So if you look around in the beast, you know, in all the catalogs, and you see other people keeping, everybody's going to be wearing any variety of stuff. But from what I understand, from what, you know, there's all these like, you know, you hear about stuff that the bees don't like, or do like dark colors. I hear that they're not really fond of dark colors. So don't be wearing your like goth outfit when you go check the hive. Also,
You might die of heat stroke.
I think the reason they got me the other day was because anyway, I wound up with weird stuff in my hair. I had like a smelly thing in my hair. So like, don't shower before you go to the hives. Be nice and filthy, and then they won't want to eat you. What else? Anything else that I'm missing as far as gloves?
No hairspray.
Yeah, no hairspray or any kind of like stinky stuff. Like, well, not stinky to us, but
No perfume.
no perfume. So it's just better to go in there without. No bananas. And I also hear no alcohol. So don't have a beer before you go into your. I mean, don't do it anyway because you gotta be like on your game. But I also hear, you know, just that's another. They're just attracted to smell different smells, and they want to know what it is, so they're gonna come at you. But anyway, so hopefully.
Can you wash those?
You can. I've detached this before to wash it, but like.
Apparently not.
No, that was like 5 years ago that I did that.
I hand wash the hood and then I'll throw the jacket in the washer, usually.
Yes, you can detach and put your jacket in the washer, but
Not today.
Hang it to dry.
Yeah, right.
pay very close attention to how the veil goes on the jacket. But the first time, we ended up calling the company and saying, we got the veil off, and we don't know how to get it back on. A while back, but, so, I mean, even take pictures, snap some pictures, and she think, oh, that's simple, but then it's so complex how this.
So
you know,
being
these
dirty's
different
okay
things.
then, right?
Yeah, so, just, be careful when you take it off that you know.
I think being dirty is okay. Earl?
I've got one other thing to add. When you're talking about washing these things, Ed told me about this last year, and it saved my life. But you go out and you're working your bees, and they get really mad at you, and they're all over the outside of it. Well, then you go in, and then the next time you go back out to the beehive, not having washed it, and it has all these pheromones that say, attack me right now, you know, or whatever. So you do wash it, you do need to rinse it, you do need to
Oh, I
clean
cover
it between
myself with
between the
smoke.
sessions
I smoke
before you go back in, because all those pheromones
Okay.
will still, those attack pheromones will still be on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, maybe I'll wash mine. Sorry.
You can watch the hood on the top rack of the dishwasher.
Ooh, top rack of the dishwasher. That's a good idea. Oh, on the bottom, that's a good question. What do you wear on the bottom? I usually wear like canvas pants, like a khakis or something, but heavier. You know, not like spandex or anything like that. So usually just something kind of baggy. And then on my feet, I usually, and that's my alarm saying stop talking. I usually wear muck boots. I just stick my whole foot, you know, like so that they can't get in there or bite my feet or something like that. So, I mean,
Tuck my
you know,
pants into my socks.
yeah, tuck your pants into your socks. You just don't look good when you're keeping bees. You look like a fool all the time. But we're all the same boat. So sometimes I walk out to my garage and like my neighbors probably see me going, "What is she wearing?" But okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Dell. All right, I think we are ready for our featured speaker for tonight. And this is Leslie Cooper. And Leslie's going to talk to us today about planting natives for pollinators and honeybees. And you're part of the Arkansas Monarch.
I can introduce myself.
Okay, wonderful. She's going to tell us a lot more about herself.
Probably, just in case. Usually I'm pretty loud, but we'll see how
Just remember, as soon as she's finished and has answered questions, then Jeff and Maureen will be available out in the lobby to take questions about other topics. Here we go.
Here we go. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Hello, my friends. I'm so excited to be with y'all today. My name is Leslie Cooper. I'm the Arkansas Monarch and Pollinator Coordinator. I am an employee of Quail Forever, but my position is a partnership position with NRCS. And that's how I found all of you. My friend Xavier in the back there asked if I would, well, he gave my name to someone and then they asked if I would come and speak to y'all. So hopefully I tell you all the things that you want to know when it comes to growing native plants and benefiting your bees as well as other bees. So because I'm short on time and I am so excited about this topic and I tend to ramble, just a quick show of hands, how many of you are more interested in like smaller urban garden type plantings? Okay. How many of you are interested in like large scale restoration plantings, maybe 5 acres or larger? Okay, still a handful, so I won't talk about that in great depth, but I do have some resources that are available to you, so we'll cover it then. So let me get cracking so that we can have some time for questions. So I am going to talk a little bit about native bee biology and also monarch biology because that's what Maureen said people might be interested in. I also think it's really important to cover the biology of everything so that you understand why the habitat aspect is so important. So I'll try and gloss over those details so that we can get to what you really want to know, what you want to plant. So I'm also going to talk about what Arkansas is doing, how you can garden with native plants or incorporate them into larger restoration plantings, and also talk about some resources. So this is my puppy Dot, and also my husband. I always throw this slide in for my in-person presentations because this is my family. You guys are now my friends. So if at any point you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me. Most of the time, I end up answering those questions in the next couple slides. But, you know, sometimes if you have a really burning question, it's better just to get it out while you still have it. So, I am here to talk about native bees today. But I wanted to talk about European honeybees just very quickly. Each and every single one of you in this room can talk about honeybees in great depth, far more than I ever could. But, you know, I just want to highlight that they're very, very important pollinators to agriculture, so thank you all for the work that you do. They are obviously managed pollinators, unless you get some feral colonies out and about. They can also forage on native plants, so even though they're not native to the US, I have 2 photos of honeybees foraging on native plants. And really, honeybees are kind of this flagship species, if you will. So when people hear save the bees, what do they think of? They think of you, and they think of our wonderful honeybees. But what about the native bees? So very quickly, when we're talking about bees, we have generalists and we have specialists. So generalists are honeybees and bumblebees and some of our other native bees. Really, I like to think of them as they're not really picky eaters. So they'll basically forage on anything. I once went to a state Arkansas Beekeepers Association meeting, and there was a woman from California there, and she said, you know, my bees in the city, she's like, they will go to a 7-Eleven and suck on a Slurpee in the garbage can. And I'm like, well, that's super gross, but you know, that's how much of a generalist they are. But we also have specialist bees. So the photo on the right is actually a squash bee. So specialist bees specialize on either a particular species or even plants in a particular genus. So for example, I spent most of May last year running around Terra Noir Natural area in Arkadelphia, chasing this longhorn bee that's gray and is very loud, and it only forages on purple prairie clover. So it only comes out to forage when that plant is blooming. So anyway, so back to native bees. So there's approximately 4,000 species of native bees in North America, and native bees have specific habitat requirements because they don't have wonderful beekeepers taking care of them year-round. So they do require foraging habitat, same as honeybees. They require nesting habitat, that depends on the type of bee. And then they also require overwintering habitat, which again, really kind of depends on where they nest. So of the native bees in Arkansas, experts estimate that we have between 400 and 650 species of native bees. And this collection on the right really represents about 200. So you can really see the diversity in sizes and shapes that we have in Arkansas. So we also have to talk about solitary bees and social bees. So again, I don't have to tell any of you the very complex and very intricate social structure of the honeybee hive. But they're kind of the anomaly in the bee world. So most of our native bees are solitary. So 90% of these bees are solitary, and this just means that the females of the species construct and provision their nests all by themselves. So there is no queen, they're all their own queens. And typically that means that they're less aggressive than honeybees because like honeybees, when they're out foraging, they don't really have, their hive to defend because that's when they get more aggressive, is they're trying to defend the food that they've stored that you're trying to steal. So, and bumblebees are the best known native social bees, but again, their colony structures are very different than that of honeybees. So, quickly about the bumblebees. There's 51 bombus species in North America, and they're considered cavity nesters. So they can use tree cavities, tussocks of grass, or even abandoned rodents' nests. This is kind of the nest sites that they typically prefer, which is kind of interesting. They are capable of sonication or buzz pollination. So certain crops like blueberries, tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplants. Basically, I like to describe it to people as these plants have pollen inside their anthers. So the anther is kind of like a salt shaker. So they can basically disengage their very strong flight muscle and vibrate at a certain frequency to extract the pollen more efficiently from the flowers. So on a per bee basis, they're more efficient pollinators than honeybees, but the advantage of honeybees is that each colony has, tens of thousands of individuals, whereas the bumblebee colonies only have, they typically have less than 200 individuals, but certain papers say that they can have up to 1,000. But still, not even a fraction of, well, it's really just a fraction of what is typically in a honeybee hive. So they also forage much closer to the nest than honeybees. It does depend on the species, and I found different papers that give different ranges, but it's typically no more than half a mile, but it can be up to a mile. And only the new guines overwinter, so it's only the new queens. So each year, when the queens emerge early in the spring, they'll go out, collect resources, lay their first brood, and then that first brood will only be the females. And then the males are produced later in the year, and then the new guines are produced later in the year, and then basically the entire colony will die except for the new guines so that they can overwinter and then go and start their own colonies the next year. So being that way, that's one of the many reasons why early and late blooming plants are particularly important if you want to benefit other bees in addition to honeybees. So there's also ground nesting bees. This makes up a majority of the rest of our native bees, but we'll talk about some other ones. About 70% of our native bees are ground nesters, solitary ground nesters, excuse me. And what they do is they dig in bare or sparsely vegetated soil. So depending on the species, this can vary from flat ground to vertical banks. And then the nest configurations can be short, simple tunnels, or like very complex branching systems. And it's really interesting because I could give an entire presentation on the different like vocabulary words on these semi-social nesters. Because yeah, like for example, you can think of some of them as kind of like an apartment building. So they all have the same entrance, but they all have their own apartments, like their own tunnels. So it's kind of interesting. So anyway, but I did mention bare sparsely vegetated soil, so I always use this as an opportunity to say this is one of the many, many reasons why prescribed fire is so important, even though most of you are interested in more of a garden setting. But sometimes if you see smoke and you're very worried about, prescribed fire, and it's kind of scary, it's very important for managing our natural places. So the other 30% of our native bees are considered wood and tunnel nesting bees, or sometimes they're called stem nesting bees. So they can use abandoned beetle burrows, or some of them can even chew out the pith from inside standing dead stems. And you can see, so like on the right from the top, there's an example of leaf cutter bees nesting. So they kind of wallpaper their babies' rooms in perfectly cut little circles. And sometimes they'll use flower petals, so it's really pretty. The next one down is like it's either a cellophane bee or a resin bee. So they'll section off each room for their babies. And then the one below that, I think, is just a mason bee. I'm pretty sure, but. So typically when I talk about stem nesting bees, or when people ask me about bees, they're like, I really want to create bee houses. So I just want to put in this slide to say that if you want to create artificial nesting structures for our native bees, there's nothing wrong with that, but just be wary of any commercially available ones, because a lot of the ones that I've seen have like very large bamboo straws that are actually too large for our native bees to use. Anything greater than like 5/8 of an inch is really too big for a vast majority of our native bees. So be aware of that, just because they're not the proper dimensions. And also they might be glued together, so they may not be able to be properly sanitized. So imagine visiting a hotel room that's never been cleaned before. So if you're interested in handouts, the tunnel nest for native bees is the brown handout on the left. That's the one that I prefer, even though I think it's 5 pages, so I have to staple it instead of having it be a front and back handout. That's the one that addresses cleaning recommendations. So, and remember, if you're really worried about, providing nesting sites and helping our native bee friends, the messaging always will come back to planting Arkansas native plants, because, we weren't putting out artificial nest structures on the landscape before. So this is just kind of an example. This is a graphic that's in the overwintering and nesting handout that I have on the back table. But basically, if you have a garden, we recommend that you leave the standing dead, even though it might be a little unsightly, because it's nature's bird feeder. So leave those stems over the winter, and then in the spring, cut back the flower stalks to, let's see, like 8 to 24 inches, and then the bees will find them, and then create their nest there. And then the new growth will actually cover up that stubble, so it won't be as unsightly, maybe to your neighbors. And then the whole process starts over again. You leave them standing over fall and winter, and then make sure that you try and prolong garden cleanup as long as possible, preferably until there's at least 7 days of above 50 degree Fahrenheit weather. so that you can give a chance for the overwintering bees to wake up. So that was kind of my crash course on native bees. Here's my crash course on monarch butterflies. So there's 3 distinct populations of monarchs in the US. There's a small non-migratory population in southern Florida. There is the western population of monarchs that overwinter along the coast in California that's found west of the Rockies. And then there's the eastern population that we see here in Arkansas that overwinter in central Mexico. Monarch caterpillars, like most Lepidoptera species, are host plant specialists. So their caterpillars only eat milkweed species. And there's 21 native milkweed species in Arkansas, so you have plenty to choose from. So from left to right, if you were interested in any of these species, it's Asclepias hirtella, which is tall green milkweed, swamp milkweed, which is Asclepias incarnata, world milkweed, which is Asclepias verticillata, and then the one on the right is one of my personal favorites. It's green antelope horn milkweed, which is Asclepias viridis. So unlike the caterpillars, the adult butterflies are generalists. So you'll see them nectaring on a variety of different species. So they're not picky eaters. But unfortunately, many people are familiar with this graph and this general trend, even with all the rest of our pollinators. So over the past 2 decades, there's been this general decline for the overwintering population in Mexico. So this graph just shows the area that the overwintering population occupies each winter. So we measure that in hectares. And then you can see the years. So the thing that I want to point out about this graph is that their 10-year average is currently sitting at 2.72 hectares. And experts estimate that we really need to maintain a 10-year average of about 6.6 hectares so that we can ensure the continuation of the monarch migration. And the previous 10 years, it looks a lot better. The previous 10-year average was still sitting at 4.5-ish hectares. So really, we've been below that target goal for a very long time. So what is Arkansas doing? Arkansas, we created the Arkansas Monarch Conservation Partnership in 2015. It is a variety of different partners that are working together to make the strategic goals and objectives that are outlined in the Arkansas Monarch and Pollinator Conservation Plan happen. So the plan was finalized in May of 2018, but really it focuses on habitat, research and monitoring, and outreach and education. And if you're interested in reading more about what we are doing, you can find the plan at our website at arkansasmonarchs.org. Woo. And I don't know if most of you have heard of John Zawijlak with Extension in Little Rock. I know he's very involved. He's a beekeeper. He's very involved and he does a lot of the beginning beekeeping classes. I think he travels around the state. Yeah, it's not just in central Arkansas. So if you ever see Dr. Z, the bee guy, tell him I said hello. But he was very involved in the writing of the plan. So what does it mean for you guys? We're talking about monarchs and native bees. Like how can we benefit each other? Well, a rising tide raises all ships, right? So when we talk about monarch and pollinator habitat, I want to define that for you so that you can be ensured that we're benefiting not only native bees and monarch butterflies, but also honeybees across the state as well. So when we talk about monarch and pollinator habitat, we're talking about establishing a high diversity of Arkansas native plants that bloom throughout the entire growing season. And it has a high diversity of flower sizes, shapes, and structures so that we can support those generalist pollinators as well as those specialist pollinators. We also want to include native milkweed species for our monarch caterpillar friends. And really we're managing to benefit all pollinators and other wildlife. So I have a lot of landowners that come to me all the time saying, like, I really want to help the bees. I either want to get involved in beekeeping or I already have bees. Like, what can you do to help me? Well, working with NRCS, we don't really have a program that will give you beekeeping supplies, but we have practices that can help you establish habitat on your property. So, how can you help? You can create habitat by planting Arkansas native plants, in case I haven't said it enough today. So, we're about halfway through time. I'm gonna cruise through it, but don't panic. I have so many handouts, it's gonna be great. Okay, so if we're talking in an urban setting, work with what you've got. You need to start out by identifying the existing light, soil, and water conditions, which really isn't any different than if you were planting traditional garden plants. And spending this time now on the front end will really save you probably some money and a lot of heartache down the road, just by picking the right plants for the right place. And starting small is okay. You can always go big later. So when I first moved to Arkansas, we were renting a house, and I exclusively had all of my native plants in terracotta pots. And because of their extensive root systems, wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I have some really old plants now, the ones that Dot didn't dig up. She did, she dug out like a 3-year-old milkweed plant, and I could have run her neck, but it's a good thing she's cute. So anyway, I had natives in terracotta pots, and I actually saw hummingbirds on my 6 little milkweed blooms. So you can do a lot with a little space. So starting small is okay, especially if you're intimidated. The other thing that you want to decide in the beginning is how formal you want your garden to be. And by that I mean, do you want it to look very manicured, like the gardens out front or in the upper left-hand corner? Do you want it to be mulched? Do you want it to look like a formal garden, just incorporating native plants? Do you already have an existing garden and you just want to remove invasive species and add in plants? And add in native plants? Or do you want it to be kind of wild and unruly, like the bottom right, like the bottom photos? Do you want it to be kind of like a pocket prairie? Or do you want it to be kind of this organized chaos where you have the plants like closely planted together, but it still kind of looks intentional, especially for those that are in like very urban areas. So very quickly, I stole this slide from someone much smarter than I am, but I just wanted to show it just to basically say that you can see the size difference in native bees. And basically what this is saying is that basically the larger the bee, the further away they can go from their nest. The smaller bees, they're probably only going to go within, a few yards of their nest. So you want to kind of keep that in mind if you're planting specifically to benefit bees. You want to make sure that you have foraging habitat and nesting habitat very close together so that they don't have to go, across town to go to the grocery store, if you forgive my metaphor. So, what do you plant? I recommend that you maximize the species diversity for your area. So, I recommend that you start with the rule of 3, but definitely don't stop there if space allows. So, by rule of 3, I mean aim for 3 species that bloom in the spring, 3 that bloom in the summer, and 3 that bloom in the fall. So 9 species. And I have a lot of really great handouts, and I'll point them out in a moment. But start there. And really remember, when you're trying to maximize diversity, the goal is to provide a succession of blooms to ensure a constant supply of nectar and pollen. Early spring and late fall are particularly important, like for our bumblebee friends, but you all are beekeepers. I'm sure you can tell me exactly like what your bees are foraging on at different months. So, and remember that this is kind of a rule of thumb. The more plant diversity that you have, the greater bee diversity you'd be able to support, but also the greater insect diversity you'd be able to support in general. So say that you establish native plants next to your vegetable garden. Other beneficial insects like predatory wasps will be attracted to the same pollinator habitat that these native bees are attracted to. So those predatory wasps what do they feed their babies? Insect larvae. So they could come to your tomato plant, say, and pick off those grubs and take them back to the nest, so that could decrease any pesticides that you may have, any insecticides that you may have to use in your garden. If you want to be efficient for pollinators, try to put multiple plants clustered together. It's more aesthetically pleasing, and it's also easier for them to find, and they expend less energy when they're pollinating those plants. So the goal is to aim for a minimum of 70% native plants on like your parcel of land. Say that you have just a house in the suburbs, and you kind of just look at your parcel and look at all of the things that are green and growing there. If you can establish at least 70% of what's growing on your property as native plants, you'd be off to a really great start. So non-native plants can provide some benefit, but just because it blooms doesn't mean it's good for bees. And I'm sure you all know that. I'll talk a little bit about cultivars in a moment. So know your natives and don't plant invasive species. There was a paper that was done by a grad student of Dr. Doug Talany, and they found that landscapes with less than 70% native vegetations are considered food deserts or habitat sinks. And they're specifically looking at insect biomass to support like native birds. They specifically look at like chickadee nests. So anyway, so if you want to plant for pollinators, plant native plants. So this is a lot. We're just gonna like take it bite-sized and then move on very quickly. So on the left-hand side, there's plants for each of the columns. And then on the right side, there's bees. And each line between those represents a plant-pollinator interaction. So the closer to the top of the list, those are the plants that were visited by the most species of bees. Excuse me. And closer to the bottom of the list, those were visited by less species of bees. And the same with the bees. So the closer the thing is to the top, the more species of flowers it visited, the more it's a generalist pollinator. And then closer to the bottom, they visited less species of flowers. So they would be considered more of like specialist bees. So you will see, here, let's see if my laser pointer works. Kind of, okay, so you will see kind of these like one-off connections where it really is just like one bee visits that one plant, but there are kind of these workhorse species. So really, you can do kind of a lot if you start planting some of these like workhorse native species, and I have a couple of those that we'll list later. But again, some of the species that are closer to the bottom of the list are visited by more of our generalist pollinators, but there are some specialized interactions. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. Okay, so don't panic, don't have to scribble. I do have a handout in the back. It looks like this. That's the next 4 slides. So I've got spring bloomers, summer bloomers, fall bloomers, and then some specific plants for honeybees. We will gloss over them very quickly, but you'll notice that I put some stars by certain species. So those are plants that like also support honeybees. And I know that because of this very ugly handout, but this is your new best friend if you're just getting started and you want like a crash course in Arkansas natives. So I'll explain this plant list a little bit later. But the spring bloomers, you'll notice there are some shrub and tree species. It's pretty difficult to find, particularly early blooming plants, just because most of our early blooming plants are like woodland ephemerals. So they're like very small and you don't get a lot of bang for your buck, if you will. So, then there's some summer bloomers. That purple prairie clover that I mentioned, that specialist bee is on there. But this is a list of those. And then there's some fall bloomers, a lot of goldenrod species, which by the way, so some of you may already know this, but a lot of people that I come across still don't. So people think that they're allergic to goldenrod because it's very bright and showy on roadsides, and that's when they start to sneeze. They're not allergic to goldenrod, so goldenrods are not wind pollinated. They're actually allergic to ragweed, but ragweed doesn't look very bright and it isn't as noticeable, but it blooms at the same time as goldenrod species. So tell your friends they're not allergic to goldenrod, they're actually allergic to ragweed. So anyway, and goldenrods are also particularly important for migrating monarchs. I see them on it all the time. So these are some species that I specifically pulled out for honeybees. Again, you'll see this really great list, and it's broken out by, let's see, forests, shrubs, trees, vines, and grasses. And I included the front page because it breaks down like the key and how you read them. But I love these tables because it's very helpful, because if you have, say, like a shady, wet area in your yard, you can just put blinders on and go through and just put little check marks by all the species that would fit those light and water requirements that are in your backyard. So highly recommend you check this one out. It's in the big stack in the back. But these are the ones that I included that basically all of the ones in that genus benefit honeybees. So these are kind of like the workhorses. So all of the milkweed species benefit honeybees. The bottom right-hand corner you'll notice is butterfly milkweed, that's Asclepias tuberosa. A lot of the coreopsis. So I did throw in rattlesnake master because it's one of my favorite plants, and it looks really cool in a garden setting because it looks so, it's just such a different texture. Let's see, so obviously sunflower species, Monarch species, which are also known as bee balm, so it is very fitting. The mountain mints, which is one of the species in the upper right-hand corner. The goldenrods that I've already mentioned, asters, and ironweeds are also very pretty. So going back to native bees, don't forget about nesting and overwintering habitat. You know, bees need more than flowers. As I'm sure you all know, you know, they need a lot of tender, loving care. So leave the leaves. You can use them as a natural mulch to provide weed control and moisture retention. And also, if you leave the leaves, you can also protect like the pupa of different Lepidoptera species. So if you have a big oak in your yard, there's a great chance that if you like get rid of all of the leaves, you're potentially destroying some butterfly chrysalises that are overwintering in that leaf litter. So reconsider how much you mulch. Bare ground is really important, especially for those ground nesting bees. And Heather Holm, one of the authors that I'll highlight a little bit later, instead of mulching, she just plants more plants. And I'm just like, what a novel concept. But she propagates a lot of her own because I can't afford to buy all native plants. So I have another handout that talks about how you can save a few bucks. You can also plant a log for those tunnel nesting bees, and you can leave the stubble like I showed you in that graphic. And you can again postpone garden cleanup so that temps are consistently above 50 degrees so that you can give them a chance to emerge in the spring. If you're interested, they also have certified garden programs. So National Wildlife Federation and Arkansas Wildlife Federation has their certified wildlife habitat. There's Monarch way stations that's done through the organization Monarch Watch. There's also the Bird Friendly Yard program that advocates specifically for native plants, and that's run through the Arkansas Audubon Society. And then if you're just looking for signs, I've seen a lot of really cute ones on Etsy, but also the Monarch Joint Venture and the Xerces Society also has a lot of really pretty signs. So if you're just getting started with natives, I want to make sure to manage your expectations. So we have a saying in the native plant world: in the first year they sleep, in the second year they creep, and in the third year they leap. So native plants are kind of like icebergs. There's a lot going on beneath the surface. before there can really be a lot going on above the surface. They really spend the first couple of years establishing really extensive root systems, so that's kind of where all their resources are going before they really start showing out above the ground. So you can get plants. I have a vendor list back there, and being in Northwest Arkansas, honestly, you're kind of spoiled. There's a lot of great groups that are based up here, so you will have an easier time getting plants than a lot of folks. Please don't dig up plants. Unless it's on your property, I guess you can do that, but you might kill them. But definitely don't steal plants from like WMAs or roadsides. There's also recurring native plant sales. So like I said, in Northwest Arkansas, the Arkansas Native Plant Society has an Ozark chapter, and then the Ozark Wild Ones also has a Facebook page, and they do a great job of sharing like native plant swaps or giveaways that are happening up here. So if you are like me and cannot afford to establish an entire garden from plugs or baby plants, because they can run anywhere from $5 to $12 a piece, I have to buy seeds and grow them myself. So I have a yellow handout back there that talks about propagating natives in milk jugs. So if you're working on the large scale projects, make sure that you're working with a local biologist who provides free technical assistance. So these are the Arkansas Game and Fish Private Lands biologists, the PLBs, and also the Gulf River Farmville biologist. So I brought one with me tonight. Her name is Katrina Sims. So if you're a large landowner and you want to learn more about what you can do on your property, Katrina, raise your hand. Thank you. She's in the back. Okay, so find Katrina afterwards or send me an email. But what these biologists will do is they'll provide you with an ecoregion seed mix. So think of this seed mix as a recipe card. So what they'll also do is give you a vendor list. So you'll take the recipe card and you'll call these different vendors for quotes. Not every vendor will have every species or ingredient on the list. That's okay, that's just how it is. Native seeds are very fickle from year to year. So their prices change and availability changes from year to year if it's a good year or not. So if you're interested in that, let me know. A quick note on nativars or cultivars. I get this question a lot because people will go into like their friendly local nursery and not really know what they're looking at. So a nativar is just a cultivar of a native species, and they can be identified from their plant tag, which I'll show you on the next slide. A straight species, if you ever heard that term, is a species that's found in nature that hasn't been cultivated for a particular feature. So the problem with cultivars and nativars is that the research varies widely depending on the species, depending on the cultivar. So be aware of what you're planting at the very least. So really quickly, we'll break it down here. So this is purple coneflower. I think it's probably like the widest, like one of the widest, like cultivated and changed species ever. So in the upper left-hand corner, this photo, that's the straight species. So the bottom right-hand photo, that is just a cultivar that was done so that it has more flowers. It's pretty similar and it looks pretty similar to the straight species. So the upper right-hand photo, that is a species that is a different color. Let's see, it's called green jewel, and it's much less visible to pollinators. So bees see UV light. So if you ever look at UV photos of flowers, they basically look like big bullseyes. And they're like, hey, the good stuff's over here. So, you know, the bees can find the nectar and pollen because the plants want them to. The bottom left-hand corner is a double-petaled bloom, and you may as well be sticking like cardboard or plastic flowers out there because it actually doesn't produce any nectar or pollen. So far be it from me to be the plant police. I will not come to your yards and say, how dare you plant this? If you want to plant a double-petaled flower because it reminds you of your grandma and you love it, go for it. But maybe consider planting some other native plants that also benefit pollinators as well. But please don't plant invasive species. That doesn't help anyone. So if you don't know how to read a plant tag, this is what I mean by like noticing stray species. So this just says the scientific name, and this has like a brand name that I covered up so I don't get sued eventually, and a quotation on like frankly scarlet. Like it will always have a weird descriptive name in quotations. So that's just an easy way to identify if you're getting a straight species or if you're getting a cultivar. Okay, so there's a lot of, resources at arkansasmonarchs.org. Another side note, make sure that you're wary of any pollinator or wildflower seed mixes, because 90% of the time they're not native. So always make sure that the species that you're planting are native to Arkansas, preferably to your ecoregion. But if you're planting on a small scale in a garden, it's okay if it's not really necessarily native to Northwest Arkansas. Maybe it's more native to like Central Arkansas. Most of the species that we included on our recommendation list are widely distributed throughout the state, so don't worry about that. That's kind of for the next level of plant nerds. And these are some resources that you can use to determine if a species is native to your part of the state. BONAP is great. I have a couple copies of how to navigate that website if you want something a little bit more user-friendly. So BONAP is great because it tells you if a plant is native to your county, but the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center will tell you if it's just native to your state, so if it's native to Arkansas or not. The USDA Plants Database is also a great resource. It's just a little clunky. And the Atlas of Vascular Plants of Arkansas, there's a free PDF download available through the Arkansas Natural Heritage Commission. So you can just Google that title and it will show you the different maps. You just have to search the species. Okay, I think I see pictures now. So these are some great handouts that I have on the back table. If you are like me and kind of have like this blank slate and you're like, I don't really know how to get started, the Missouri Prairie Foundation's Grow Native website is a fantastic resource. They have a bunch of landscape plants available. So all of these plants will benefit pollinators regardless of the name, because you're using native plants. So for example, I think they have like Hummingbird Haven or Frog Pond or something like that. So don't be deterred, just kind of pick something that would be suitable for your area. These are some excellent books. If you are interested, so that Heather Holm lady that I mentioned earlier, she's the author of the two books on the left. She also just created a book called Wasps, which is really fantastic. And then my personal favorite is The Bees in Your Backyard, because it really highlights the diversity and just how flippin' cool bees are. So, and I use this opportunity to say, if you're interested in native plants and you want to kind of start building that foundation, I highly, highly, highly recommend Dr. Doug Talmey's work. So Bringing Nature Home is over 10 years old, but it provides a great foundation and a case for why planting natives is so important. And then Nature's Best Hope was produced within the last 3 years, I believe. I think it came out in February of 2020. But I just want to say this. So Dr. Doug Talmey, in his latest book, Nature's Best Hope, says that if half of American lawns were converted to native plants, we would create the equivalent of a 20 million acre national park. That is 9 times the size of Yellowstone and 100 times the size of Shenandoah National Park. So really, in a world where conservation is kind of gloom and doom and really sad and kind of depressing, I really love his messaging because it really puts conservation in your hands and it makes it seem achievable. He's not asking for the whole yard, he's asking for half. So, and if you're a landowner that's interested in learning more about federal and state cost share programs and receiving free technical assistance, feel free to contact your local biologist, or you can email me and I will connect you to them. Yes, sorry, my brain. So these are the quote from the biologist. Basically what they do is they help landowners utilize federal and state cost share programs so that they can create habitat for wildlife, including monarchs and pollinators. So they provide free technical assistance, they write free management plans, and also they work with the Arkansas Game and Fish Private Lands biologists to cover the state, kind of in line with the 12 focal areas around the state. So, take-home messages. Plant native plants so that you can ensure a constant supply of nectar and pollen, basically from March to November. And make sure that you're considering all aspects of the habitat, foraging, nesting, and overwintering habitat. And don't spray insecticides. It will kill pollinators in addition to the target species. Any questions, my friends? I just want to say, normally my presentations go for like an hour, and I did it in like 44:30 on the dot, so I'm very proud of myself. Yes, sir.
Okay, so the first question is, are the native bees and bumblebees disappearing?
Yes, so I did not include this slide, but basically, so native bees are very hard to study just due to their nature. 90% of them are solitary bees, so try and pick one of your honeybees and follow them around. So it's very difficult to study them and monitor their populations. I say that because of that, bumblebee species really are the best studied native bees because they're big, so they can fix telemetry tools to them, and they can follow them, and it's easier to find their nest sites. There's actually a GSP, which is what my dog is, that is out west that goes into these subalpine areas, and she finds these endangered bumblebee nests so that they can study them. So it's really fantastic. But back to your question, I wish I had the slides up front, but I want to say 70% of our bumblebee species, that sounds too high. I want to say about half of our bumblebee species, so those 52 bombus species, are in a threatened or near threatened category, which is really terrible. Any other questions while I try and find that slide? Yes, sir.
I probably missed it, but what's a forb?
Oh, thank you. A forb is just a fancy way of saying a wildflower.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Would you be willing, if this association was interested in making Fayetteville a bee city through the Xerces?
Yeah, sure. So I could provide some guidance. I could, help kind of connect you that way. But there's a lot of different options for municipalities. Xerces obviously is amazing. They do the bee-friendly cities and also bee-friendly campuses, which obviously you know about. There's also the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, the National Wildlife Federation. That one doesn't have a fee. So if you find that the
Bee city isn't very expensive.
does it have just the startup fee, or is it an annual fee?
It's an annual, but it's not very much.
Oh, good. Okay. Honestly, most of the people that I work with, they're like, we can't pay anything. I'm like, well, that limits our options. But
You
yeah.
said it at the Mountain View, surely they have to do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the city of Fayetteville actually was one of our contributing members. And if it's still the same mayor, which I think it is, he signed the Mayor's Monarch Pledge as well. So I don't think he would be opposed to doing a bee-friendly city. So if you wanted guidance or help with, what you would need to do to fill those requirements, absolutely. Okay. Yes.
Will compost piles in the garden help native bees, bumblebees over winter?
So, yes, are you talking about so forgive me, those of you that are very familiar with composting. Are you talking about just kind of a place where you put your leaf litter and stuff? Or are you talking like a hot compost pile that you
No.
specifically layer?
Just the place where you put the leaves, all the plant material from the house, banana peels, whatever.
I don't think that would be, a great spot for them to nest, just because, it would be really hot, and if you're constantly adding stuff, they really don't overwinter that far below the surface if they do go underground at all. They're not really like digging bees. I think that they just kind of like dig down in maybe like loose leaf material and then just kind of hide out for the winter. Let's see. Here, this is the slide I was looking for. So to answer your other question really quickly. So if we're using bumblebees as kind of the canary in the coal mine, 1/4 of all bumblebee species are in a threatened or near threatened category. So you can see the breakdown. So there's 28 species that are fine, and then 5 that are data deficient, and then, let's see, 4 that are critically endangered, 2 that are endangered, 5 that are vulnerable, and 1 is in a near threatened category. So that's not great. So anyway, I just wanted to, it was gonna bother me because of course I took out that slide that you asked about. So I think that the only reason why I say all of that about the compost pile is because I'm on a lot of bee groups, and people have said like, oh no, I found like a bumblebee colony, in my compost pile, what do I do? And people are basically like, well, just leave it alone if you can, because you can't, moving the nest don't help. They can't find it. So that colony kind of dies, which is really sad, but, Yes?
A question I have some land and I want to keep bees, but I kind of live in rural Arkansas and I have a lot of wild bees all around. Will keeping bees negatively impact the native bees that I already have? Is one of my big
Swarms. Because native bees swarm too.
I know, it's okay. So it's always best to provide a diversity of resources, because the thing is like the honeybees that you will keep can forage a lot further away. So how many acres are you talking? 30? So it's pretty sizable. It's a lot more than some of my like urban beekeepers come and talk to me about. It depends on what's there. I'm always hesitant to make any recommendations without seeing the site first. If it's just degraded prairie or degraded woodland, all you would have to do to restore like native plants to the site is basically thin and burn. And maybe use some strategic herbicides in case you have any like non-native sod forming grasses, like fescue or Bermuda, or Bahia, or God forbid, Sericea lespedeza. I really hope you don't have that. I hope none of you have that. It's terrible. But no, it really won't. It'll be fine. The more habitat that you can improve on your land, the more. I don't know if everyone's making noise on the Sericea lespedeza.
I don't know what that is.
Okay. So really quick crash course in quail management. So like everyone knows kudzu, right?
Yes.
Okay, so kudzu was originally introduced as an erosion control method, right? And it got way out of hand. So that's kind of how Sericea lespedeza was. Believe it or not, that's not the scientific name. Like the scientific name is like Lespedeza cunata or something funny. But Sericea lespedeza was originally planted as like a wildlife tool, and basically it puts out millions of seeds, and it just creates this like dense forest of kind of like waist tall vegetation, and it chokes out all of the natives. And it's terrible on properties because people would plant it for quail. Well, it's way too thick for quail to use, and also they can't digest the seeds. So anyway, it's very bad. And I'm always very sad when people have it on their properties because people are always so excited when they come to us. And if they have Sericea lespedeza on their property, it goes from a year of site prep to at least 3. But if you don't completely eradicate it, it will eventually win out over your planting. And you can't kill it with fire. It likes fire. It decreases all the competition around it, so it just comes back with a vengeance. So anyway, that's the crash course on Sericea lespedeza. Sorry. But yes, I think that as long as you're doing habitat improvements, you won't be hurting the population. So I would just be aware of like, where your hives are. But remember, honeybees will forage, I can never remember, is it 5 miles or 5 kilometers?
3 miles.
Okay, there we go. That's so about 3 miles or 5 kilometers. Locked in. Okay. Any other questions, my friends?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Going back on the composting, does the growing mushrooms or anything do anything for helping the bees at all?
I don't think so. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a fungus expert. I really wish I was, but I believe that they just go based on spores. So there's not really any pollination that occurs. Xavier's nodding, so I'm going to believe him. Yes.
We are a farmer's Tedford farm. We have been producing native wildflower seeds for our ecotype region through the Audubon Society, and we have our seed packets available at the White River Nursery. They are local native forbs to this area. They are selling them for $5.99 packet, and we're going to be bringing them more soon. They're starting to run out of them. We've got 2 types of goldenrods that they should have, and we've got the iron weeds and the liertius, the prairie blazing star. So quite a few of the ones that you have on your list. If you go to White River Nursery, the Tedford Farms seed packets are native ecotype to the Ozarks area.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being a part of the Native Project. I work with Jonathan a lot.
Yes.
And Brownstone is who we contract.
Mhm. Yes.
Very constant.
Yes.
Under seeds. Not just because of the contract.
No, John's great. I've gone on field tours with him before. She just mentioned that Brownstone Native Nursery is a great place to get seed from. As a government-funded employee, as a federally funded employee, I cannot advocate for any vendor or brand over another. So, that said, when we provide the seed mix, we provide a vendor list. So yes, Brownstone is one of the vendors on that list, but I always encourage people to shop around so that they can get the most bang for their buck.
That's great. And that's your email up there, lcooper@forever.org. Is that the best email to reach? If you have further questions or any other things. Yes. So if you want to okay. So if you want to see her email.
Oh, do you need it?
Yeah. Can you move it up there for just a moment? She's going to put it back up. Let me make just a couple of announcements. Leslie will put her email back up so you can take a picture of it and write it down real quick in case you have further questions. Remember that Maureen and Jeff will be out in the lobby to answer other bee questions not related to Leslie's topic. Also, just remember to pick up some materials on the back tables. This one and back there, 2 tables. And if you're a mentee and your name was up here earlier, or we gave you, sent you an email and let you know we have a notebook for you, please be sure to pick up your notebook in the back with Earl. Okay, I think that's about it. May 8th, the second Monday of next month will be our next monthly meeting, so we hope to see you guys back. And meanwhile, happy beekeeping.
Waiting. They're gonna be living the dream at Wilson Park. Okay, she's got to hit line for this.
Yeah.